If you were to ask me what was the one thing that helped me transition from a videographer to a cinematographer, I would say it was honestly choosing to shoot with budget cinema lenses for 1 year straight. DZO had sent me a set of their Vespid Cinema Primes, and so it was kind of the perfect chance to take a leap, and honestly turned out to be one of the most important moves in my filmmaking career. Over the last 3 to 4 years, I've grown from primarily solo one-man band type shoots to now working with pretty full-sized production teams on just about every other project. So here I am in 2024 figuring out what my next steps might be, and DZO reached out about a new set of lenses. So what I want to know is how well these can convince not only me, but directors and producers that I work with in the industry of their image. Like, can it be a set of glass that's suitable and maybe even desirable for that higher budget work that I'm sometimes doing? So in this video, I want to talk everything about these lenses, their real world performance, the image and character, who I think they're for, and even compare them against some iconic high-end lens sets to see how they actually hold up. So let's knock a few of the technicals out of the way. The Arles, it's like Arles, the lineup now consists of 10 focal lengths. Set A gave us the 25, 35, 50, 75, and 100 millimeter. With set B, we have the 14 millimeter, 21, 40, 135, and 180 millimeter. They're all mostly a crazy fast T1.4, with the exception of the 14, the 135, and the 180, and weighing in between about 1.4 to 1.9 kilograms, just between 3 and 4 pounds. They of course come in a PL mount that is user swappable to a Canon EF mount. They have a 95 front outer diameter. There's also a 86 millimeter threaded front for circular filters. Kind of a non-standard size, but still good to have the option. They have a 16 blade iris, a 270 degree focus throw, and a very well-made hard case that does come included with either set A or B if you end up getting those. So overall, how do they look? Well, it's not gonna come as any surprise. These things are beautiful. I mean, these truly have a large format look and feel and depth that I really have not seen on many other budget spherical cinema lenses. So in these examples, I am gonna show stuff that is commercial footage that definitely has like a stylized grade from the project, but I also wanna show some stuff in just like Rec 709, just so you can get a feel for the image that these lenses kind of have right out of the camera. Character is of course a hugely subjective topic, and I want to do my best to avoid sounding like a broken record here, but to me, these fall in line nearly right in the middle with a modern optic design with rich detail, sharpness, contrast reproduction, and something well aged with ultra forgiving fall off and texture and color rendition. These things are beautifully sharp and full of detail. They render contrast and like micro contrast incredibly well. Nothing overly sterile or clinical, but the resolving power of them and how much detail they provide feels pretty undeniably modern in my mind. Wow, being sick and filming A-roll sucks. Okay, time out. And of course now the sun has gone down, so this light outside makes no sense. Like, yeah, like that. It's just dark out, but somehow there's a sun. Let's talk about these side-by-sides. I had the opportunity to work with Boca Rentals in Los Angeles to go into one of their testing rooms to compare these lenses to a few different lens sets. We had the Zeiss Supreme Primes, we had the Cooke S7s. There's a lot. We tested pretty much every focal length. I don't want to bore you guys. Side-by-side tests are kind of obnoxious in my mind. A lot of people have been hearing that the DZO Arles are definitely comparable, or in some ways could be competitive to something like a Zeiss Supreme Prime or a Cooke Prime.
The whole set would be one of these lenses would be the whole set.
I think it's more than that. Look, I'm not a lens nerd. I'm not a person who's going to know all of the optical formulas and the differences between what elements do what and coatings, refractions, and
Do you guys want to know what your boyfriend's actually doing? Today, we're reviewing.
What I wanted to get out of this side-by-side test is, me as a DP, if I put these different lens options on the front of the same camera, the same sensor, am I going to notice something significant, something distinguishable that is going to convince me why one is really better than the other?
Oh, that's like fall off. Like yeah. I love that.
Now, we were shooting on the Sony FX6s. We had the settings fundamentally matched, although we were using auto VND. So as we adjusted the T-stop of the lenses, it would just adjust exposure. exposure, and the metering was pretty much the same. So they should match, but there might be a little bit of exposure variance. Now the bulk of these Zeiss Supremes are a T1.5 compared to the 1.4. So you will notice wide open in some of these shots, the DZOs should have a softer depth of field. Looking at the 25 mil here, I mean, just kind of flipping through the Zeiss Supreme versus the DZO Arles, and like these look not that far off. Color right off the bat, you're gonna see that the DZOs are noticeably warmer. You could say that the Zeiss might have a little bit more magenta. I would argue to say that they're definitely more neutral. The DZOs to me are leaning what I would kind of call like a Cooke warmth. Center sharpness, really quite comparable, but when we compare the outer edges of the frame, looking over at the brick, it's like shocking how different they feel. You know, T14, T15, you wouldn't expect there to be much. Now, so the Cooke is a T2, so wide open, we're certainly gonna notice a lot different feel in the image. There's definitely gonna be a lot more out of focus in the background, but color is surprisingly close. The DZO almost leans a little warmer too than the Cooke, which is kind of surprising because Cooks are pretty warm. The S7 itself is a fairly clean Cooke look. I think the S4s probably might have been a little more fair of a comparison for this, but they are a Super 35 lens. Right away, I mean, it's pretty significant. The DZOs have a lot of halation, like a lot of bloom around light sources. Wide open against the Zeiss Supreme, we do see that there's definitely kind of a little bit of chromatic aberration happening, a pinkish green outline. Now closed down to 2.8, Zeiss Supreme, really clean. You know, there's no real excess color or bloom, so controlled. The DZOs, it's sharp in the center, like it easily matches the Zeiss in the center, but the corners, as we fall off, the Zeiss is holding a lot more detail. And even the Cooke has a lot more detail at a 2.8. Interesting. This is the 32 millimeter versus the DZO 35 millimeter. I mean, similar bokeh texture overall. This is at 2.8, doesn't tend to have like a super distinguishable difference here. I'm not really looking for a super specific, perfectly detailed comparison here. I wanna see just like generally, how does the image feel side by side? The Supreme Prime is a very noteworthy piece of glass, very clean, controlled look. What do you guys think? What are you seeing?
Still seeing more separation in the Arles. I've seen that throughout.
It definitely is like blooming. Like it feels like anything that's warm, like the backlight and like the fairy lights is more present in the frame.
Okay, so most noteworthy thing for me, without a doubt, the fall off. Like it shocked not only me, but literally every single person that got the chance to use these lenses with me. I feel like there's so many words and terms that come up in like lens reviews, like buttery and painterly and creaminess. Like I don't
I did just go off of that with Zokias. I was telling you, like I wanted like micro contrast where there's sharpness, but then I'd fall off into almost just like that butterly painting like look. Right. Zokia does deliver on that. It looks like these deliver like a little bit more with that stick, to be honest.
There's just kind of like this like unique like middle line where a lens, like once you feel it, once you see it, like it just works. Even if a shot is a little bit soft, like that's to me kind of a defining characteristic of what I feel like separates high-end lenses from low-end lenses. If you're in between focus marks, like does it still have like a pleasing feel? Or is it just like obvious, like when a shot is slightly off, or like when you're just kind of racking to somebody's face, like once it comes into focus, is it like blah, or is it just smooth and forgiving and creamy?
I'm impressed with the fall off more than anything. I feel like I'm skeptical of all budget cinema stuff that claims to be as good as other stuff. Not saying that they do that, but the fall off is the most impressive part. Like I've shot at the signature primes before, and these are really appealing.
Like when you think of super speeds, right? Wide open, insane fall off.
Yeah.
This has almost that.
It's beautiful.
That aura to it. I love that, dude. Like look at even you just out of focus right now. It's pleasing.
You get the classic benefits of a modern optical design, like having extremely well-controlled focus breathing, minimal chromatic aberration. I mean, I've shot in a lot of different environments, even wide open. Like it's very subtle, it's very controlled, a little lean toward the green and magenta side, but it's nothing that's not correctable. They have very well-controlled vignetting and distortion, even on the 14 millimeter. It's pretty minimal. Like lines tend to stay fairly straight, even out to the corners of the frame.
What do you think of the DZO Arles lenses?
Oh, I think they're quite nice, yeah.
I've used these now on a ton of different types of things. A commercial project recently that I did for a company called Brompton Bikes. They make these like really high-end, kind of like luxury folding commuter bikes. This is a lot of product. Like we want this bike to feel clean and sharp and sleek. And so a lens with good detail and sharpness and optical performance is important. But this spot also has this lifestyle piece. It's a partnership with this artist, Chantel Martin, who actually did the artwork on the bike. So we don't want it to feel too sharp, like too sterile. We want it to feel tangible. We want to feel her character and her presence in this piece. And so something like this lens that kind of, again, falls right in the middle line of that to make the product look beautiful, but still make her and this story and this world that we're visually capturing feel soft and feel inviting and feel warm. We also did use these on the little Wes Anderson short film that we did. For a Wes Anderson type project, I mean, he notoriously uses a lot of deep focus. So I was really curious to see, you know, like when we take and we close them down to like a 5, 6, even more in some cases, how do these things feel when you do see a lot in focus within the frame? For some of these projects, I was using it on the Komodo, which is a Super 35 sensor. And so it's definitely not using the entire image circle. So their character is really not going to fully come through. But to me, that is kind of a good test too. Like if we're using a smaller portion of the image circle, do they still have a quality that feels nice, like that feels usable? Even stop down on a smaller sensor, I feel like these things look really pleasing, like really pretty.
Okay, one thing I just want to put out there, definitely been a lot of conversation lately in the YouTube filmmaking community. A lot of people are like, well, oh, if you're doing something as a review, but the company's sending you the product and you get to keep it, you know, there's this whole thing about, you know, bias. I guess I just want to say my piece in that, yes, there is an inherent obligation that I have to that company, and usually it's posting a video of some sort. In my personal situation, being a primarily freelance cinematographer and video editor, I don't have dependency and I don't have my livelihood relying on my YouTube content. I don't have an inherent need to say good things about a brand in hopes that more brands will send me stuff. I ultimately want to know and test this gear for myself. I want to know if this is going to work in my workflow. I want to post things that are authentic and can help provide insight to somebody like you, maybe interested in purchasing a piece of gear. And in all honesty, the DZO Arles, when they were first announced, I was pretty much ready to buy them. I was ready to get them as quick as I could once they came out, after the NAB. And so of course, it's an amazing thing being able to have a company send me something. I don't get to keep all of them. But that said, I'm not just gonna spew good things about these lenses if they're not good. I think they're pretty damn good. And depending on how many I get to keep, I'm gonna buy the rest of the set, like done and done. So anyways, a little side rant over. Now, of course, no optical design or lens option is going to be perfect. But I do have to point out the one thing that, a few other people kind of caught on to, and that is the flares. By no means would I call this like an obnoxious or a non-pleasing flare. In fact, I think it looks good in a lot of situations. There's a little bit of veiling, there is some nice shapes, but in particular on some of the focal lengths, there's definitely some elements that cause some pretty weird looking shapes. They also skew with quite a bit of blue. I mean, it definitely was probably just the blue torch that we were using. In general environments, like when you're looking at a sun flare, it's not that pronounced of a blue color. It's just seems to be in particular with like a strong blue light source that we're seeing this amount of difference. Still, it's noteworthy how much more controlled and less saturated and kind of over the top that the Supremes and the Cooke S7s were. Man, I can sit here looking at these lens tests all day and nitpick. Both the Zeiss and the Cookes have incredible consistency and performance throughout their entire focal range. But man, I gotta say, I don't think these DZOs are too far behind. Now, talking about price a little bit, because, let's face it, while I did kind of categorize these as a budget cinema lens, and $2,300 or $2,400 per lens is not a small amount of money. I'll be upfront in saying that I don't think these are an investment for everybody looking to get into video. If you just want a cinema lens to learn the experience of working with manual focus and working with optics that aren't stick it on and go, then there's certainly options, and I think the Vespids are a phenomenal piece of glass for that. Just the use
and repetition made me a better cinematographer. But I'm branching into a new phase of my work and my career where I do need optics and I do need lens options that stand out. Owning a good or expensive set of lenses is by no means essential if you're trying to be, you know, a hireable working DP. Renting is a common practice and it's not something that you should be afraid of. But having something like this in my arsenal that I can probably charge for on my productions, you know, I can get some kit fees. At this price point, this is something I would invest in. This is something that I'm confident in pitching to a producer or pitching to a director to use for their project. I'm confident in the image that these lenses give me the ability to create. So over the next 6 months or so, you can count on me using these things as much as possible. And I will be following up with a more in-depth video about the financial and career impact of owning this set of optics.